Federal officials tonight are going gangbusters, trying to figure out what happens next and who's in charge. Who ordered the classic gangland-style street execution of the #1 mobster of the nation's #1 mob, and who is going to take over an empire of dirty money and power built on drugs, flesh peddling, violence, and intimidation? Rita Braver reports.
Big Paul Castellano, reputed godfather of the Gambino family and the man considered boss of all mob bosses in the country, was on his way to a Manhattan steakhouse. As he stepped from his black Lincoln, 3 men wearing fur hats and trench coats suddenly appeared, pulled guns, pumped 6 bullets into Castellano and 6 into his top capo, Thomas Bellotti, and then calmly walked away. Castellano was under indictment in the federal government's case against the leadership of New York's 5 mafia families, known as the Commission. He was also currently on trial and out on $2 million bail in a car theft and murder case.
Well, I don't think they have to prove guilt or innocence with him anymore. That case is over.
The main theory that law enforcement officials are working is that this was part of a power struggle within the Gambino family, with younger members trying to seize control. Officials say the Young Turks were concerned that Castellano's trial was keeping him from paying enough attention to mafia money-making activities, and they say that leadership in the other families might have agreed.
He was just not functioning. He was not strong enough to handle the day-to-day business of his group.
Castellano's violent death came in the tradition of the murder of another Gambino boss, Albert Anastasia, and of Carmine Galante of the Bonanno family. Law enforcement officials say the public should not take the attitude that it's okay for mobsters to rub each other out.
Their ability to murder in cold blood with impunity enhances their ability to extort money from people, to shake down unions, to sell drugs, and people have to start realizing that.
At Castellano's Staten Island home, all was quiet today, but his death may create turmoil in the mob nationwide as power is realigned. Rita Braver, CBS News, New York.
Family names in organized crime went on trial today in New York City. 8 defendants are charged with running a nationwide racketeering network and being members of what the law enforcement officials call an overall mafia board of directors. Also in New York, opening arguments are scheduled this week in the trial of John Gotti. CBS News reporter Anthony Mason looks tonight at the man accused of being top mobster of the nation's #1 mob.
Even in New York City, the name John Gotti was virtually unknown until December 16th last year. That night, Paul Castellano, the reputed head of the Gambino crime family, was gunned down outside Sparks Steakhouse. FBI agents have since testified that they believe the man behind the killings and the man who has taken Castellano's place is John Gotti. Only 45 years old, Gotti has become quickly recognizable, if only for his custom-made suits and his frequent stops at the Stylorama hair salon.
He's got very good taste. He likes his hair extremely perfect. He's such a gentleman that, you know, you can't believe it.
But a federal indictment charges that from a base of operations called the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, Gotti headed a crew of mobsters who engaged in racketeering, extortion, robbery, and murder.
I don't think there's a place in America where we can get a fair trial.
Gotti's attorneys say the case has been prejudiced by stories which even in Gotti's own neighborhood have become local legend.
In 1980, Gotti's 12-year-old son was killed when he ran out in front of a neighbor's car. Within weeks, the neighbor disappeared. He has never been found, and detectives say they don't expect to solve the case.
Earlier this year, Romuald Pisek, a refrigeration mechanic, accused Gotti and an associate of beating and robbing him in a dispute over a double-parked car. But when the case went to court, Pisek suddenly decided not to testify.
If I did go stand there and say that this is Mr. Gotti and this is Mr. Coletta, they assaulted me and robbed me, I'm not sure.
Gotti's bail has since been revoked. The judge feared he might harass jurors, whose names will also be kept secret. Last week, the government revealed it had taped conversations between Gotti and a mafia informer. Gotti's lawyers called it idle conversation, but investigators believe the tapes will make the man they call the new godfather past history. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
In New York City this morning, the man police call the country's most powerful crime boss faces the possibility of life in prison for allegedly ordering the shooting of a union official. Barbara Nevins of WCBS TV reports.
John Gotti looked pale after a night in a Rikers Island cell. Smartly dressed in a sport coat and turtleneck, he didn't hesitate to respond to charges of assault and conspiracy.
John Gotti, how do you plead these charges? Guilty or not guilty?
Police arrested Gotti in Little Italy as he left the Ravenite Social Club. Hundreds of hours of secret recordings made in Gotti's Ozone Park headquarters reveal investigators say that he and two others ordered the 1986 shooting of Carpenters Union business agent John O'Connor. Gotti on the tapes was overheard to say O'Connor must be bust or busted up. Ronald Goldstock, chief of the State Organized Crime Task Force, had the club bugged.
John Gotti, alleged in the indictment to be the boss of the Gambino family, is now under indictment, ironically, for an act, it's alleged, that was designed to consolidate his power as the head of a family racked by assassination and dissension.
The reason for the shooting was straightforward. O'Connor allegedly ordered his boys to smash up the construction site of what is now Bankers and Brokers Restaurant in Battery Park City. The restaurant, owned by a reputed Gambino associate, wasn't using union labor. The vandalism was retribution. But John Gotti, as the new boss of the Gambino crime family, had to have the last say, according to prosecutors. And members of the Westies crime gang were allegedly hired as the shooters. O'Connor is under indictment for ordering the damage. Prosecutors are aware of Gotti's celebrity, his folk hero status.
His financial resources are literally that of the family, which is an extensive criminal organization throughout the United States and throughout the world.
As prosecutors asked for Gotti to be held without bail, Gotti stood silently. His attorney said Gotti won't run.
He's not going anyplace. He's been in New York his whole life. He's never ran away from a problem ever.
Gotti was released on $100,000 bail. I'm Barbara Nevins for CBS News, New York.
Justice Department reorganization will lessen the government's ability to go after other mafia godfathers. Richard Schlesinger has our report on that.
When John Gotti walks into court for his third trial in less than 5 years, the smile on his face is a slap in the face to prosecutors. The government says the man who gives money to the homeless is the most powerful crime boss in America.
He's gonna give you some money, Pete. All right, Pete, get us some money.
The head of the Gambino crime family, a real-life godfather. But despite 2 attempts, they have been unable to convince a jury.
Right now, the state is trying to end the myth, to end the mystique, as it were, that Gotti is invincible.
Gotti is accused of ordering the shooting.
Reggie Harris.
Reginald.
A New York City jury is expected to begin deliberations today in the trial of John Gotti, the reputed boss of an organized crime family. Barbara Nevins of WCBS TV reports that defense attorneys charge the case is built entirely on mafia hysteria.
If this were John Q. Citizen on trial, it wouldn't take you 5 minutes to go back in there, come out, look at the state's prosecutors, 4 of them, 50 of them, 1,000 of them, and say not guilty.
But it is not John Q. Citizen. It is John Gotti, the reputed boss of the Gambino crime family. And prosecutors have been embarrassed twice before, failing to win convictions against him. Defense attorneys in a highly effective double-team play appealed to the jury for fairness. They asked the jurors to put mob labels aside.
This is a challenge from the media, and they're rising to the challenge.
Gotti and his co-defendant, Anthony Guerreri, are accused of ordering the shooting of Carpenters Union leader John F. O'Connor in May of 1986. O'Connor was a reluctant witness here last week. But today, defense attorneys told the jurors the case had nothing to do with O'Connor. The defense attorneys mocked the prosecutor's evidence, barely audible, secretly recorded tapes, which were enhanced and given a new spin with transcripts provided by the prosecutors.
It's like a screenplay. And this is why the case gets corrupt. The screenplay is written by the prosecutors. It has a goal. The goal is to get John Gotti. And the attacks here on us, the attacks on Robert Morgenthau, the attacks on the criminal justice system are outrageous, unfounded.
I'm Barbara Nevins for CBS News, New York.
Marie's on that phone. I hope you didn't shut it off. Why don't you just talk to her? Turn it off.
It's going to get something out of the trunk of this car.
On the left-hand side.
Close the door. Close the door.
Can I get you on?
And this morning, on Friday, a federal judge found alleged mafia chief John Gotti innocent of racketeering and conspiracy charges, and he walked out a free man. The government is still watching him, though, and he knows it, which may make the taste of victory a bit sour. Barbara Nevins of WCBS TV reports.
As the first reputed mob boss to beat a major federal racketeering indictment, John Gotti now has to contend with the notoriety of acquittal. For Gotti and his family, it has been a weekend of catered platters and quiet celebration.
Very good, very happy.
Did you have Neighbors are treating Gotti like a much-maligned government hostage. They are tying yellow ribbons on trees outside of his home and the social club from which he is said to run the nation's most powerful crime family. If there is a sense of victory in Gotti's world, it is bittersweet. John Gotti and his family are aware that the feds are still after him.
Do you think the feds are going to try to nail your brother again?
Without a doubt.
Prosecutors have made it plain. John Gotti remains a target.
This office intends to prosecute every organized crime target that we have evidence on.
Last June, the entire hierarchy of the Gambino crime family, minus Gotti, was indicted on federal racketeering charges. This April, Gotti could find himself in the courtroom with the others. In addition, FBI agents say Gotti ordered the 1985 killing of his boss, Paul Castellano, and prosecutors trying to build a case are combining evidence from the murder with information from tapes secretly recorded in Gotti's social club. In the meantime, the FBI says John Gotti is a power to be reckoned with. In New York, Barbara Nevins for CBS News.
Selection began here in New York today for the trial of the man reputed to be the nation's #1 mobster. As Giselle Fernandez reports, it's the government's latest attempt to get a guilty verdict against John Gotti and make it stick.
It was February 1990. New York's Little Italy shot up the sky. John Gotti faced down the government and beat the rap again.
We're all happy. We're all happy. We got a good decision. The whole city should be happy.
Gotti's acquittal, his third court victory in 4 years, fueled his legendary status as Teflon Don. To some, he's a modern-day Al Capone.
The reason why he's a folk hero is because he beat the first case. He is handsome. He does wear $2,000 suits. He is well-groomed. Every hair is always in place. He's quick with one-liners.
It's Gotti's air of invincibility that's even served him well in the courtroom. Despite charges he rigged past trials, jurors seemed more charmed by him than frightened.
You see him there in courtroom. He's well-dressed. He's clean-shaven. He looks good. I mean, they tell you about all the things he's doing. He doesn't look like a thug. He doesn't look like a criminal.
But now those who observe the mob say Gotti's winning streak is about to screech to a halt. For the government, this is a must-win case. They've said it before, but this time the feds say they've really got the goods to lock the reputed godfather away for life.
You tell this punk, me, John Gotti, tonight, you sever your head off. You're looking.
These surveillance tapes, say prosecutors, will prove Gotti is a ruthless crime boss of the Gambino family, responsible for the murder of, among others, his predecessor, Paul Castellano, shot dead outside a New York steakhouse. Prosecutors have another lethal weapon. Gotti's hand-picked underboss cut a deal and will testify for the government.
The decision by Sammy Gravano to testify is certainly a big event. He's been there since John Gotti came to power. He knows where all the bodies are buried.
Gotti's associates had little to say about the trial. Outside their clubhouse door hangs a yellow ribbon of hope for their boss's return. But with him or without him, family business goes on as usual. Giselle Fernandez, CBS News, New York.
Back car. No, he's coming, he's coming. Stay there.
Photograph from the building.
Somebody.
face. That's the face. Hey, that's wrong. Okay. You take that? Oh, no, man. Go away. Go away, go away, go away.
Put a mic on.
I know what you said.
Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. A stunning defeat for the government's battle against organized crime in a New York courtroom today. John Gotti, the reputed New York mafia boss, went free. A jury acquitted him and 6 others for alleged criminal activities as part of the Gambino family, the largest so-called mafia family in the country. CBS News reporter Anthony Mason has been covering the trial.
In a 6-month trial, the government threw everything from wiretaps to surveillance tape at John Gotti, but they couldn't make their case stick. The man they say is the boss of the nation's most powerful mafia family was today found not guilty of racketeering and conspiracy.
They reviewed it and they came to the final truth, justice. John Gotti and 6 other co-defendants were not guilty. They should never have been brought to this courtroom to begin with in the first place.
Investigators believe Gotti came to power when his predecessor, Paul Castellano, was murdered in December 1985. Surveillance cameras have been watching him for years, and mobsters turned informant testified he was a hoodlum's hoodlum. When the verdict was read today, gasps were heard in the courtroom. Gotti smiled, then glared over at the prosecutors and shouted, "Shame on them."
The jury's job was to decide whether or not the defendants were guilty. They did their job, and that is the end of that.
The Gotti verdict ends a string of government victories which had put many of the nation's top mafia bosses behind bars. Tony Dux Corallo, Carmine Jr. Persico, and Fat Tony Salerno were each sentenced to 100 years in prison in January. FBI agents believe Gotti planned Paul Castellano's murder, and prosecutors are expected to try to make another case against him.
The jury has spoken. We'll move on to the next case. Mr. Maloney, equal figure.
But Gotti, imprisoned during the trial, is tonight a free man, thanks to a jury whose names were never revealed for their own protection. Said one defense lawyer, the government's case was a magic show, and today it went up in smoke. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
Here in New York, the government's top mob witness has begun testifying in the trial of reputed crime boss John Gotti. Mary Murphy of WCBS TV reports on the first dramatic revelations.
At one time, they considered themselves brothers, a team even when the FBI arrested them. John Gotti, reputed godfather, and Sammy the Bull Gravano, his most trusted aide, his underboss. But trust turned into betrayal when Gravano became the highest-ranking mob member to ever testify for the government. His eyes darted nervously as he faced the man he called the boss and detailed the daring plot and execution of the former mob chief Paul Castellano outside a Manhattan steakhouse in 1985. He said Gotti's close associate had approached him. He wanted to know if I was with him as far as killing Paul Castellano. He told me John was with us. Why did Sammy Gravano turn against his mentor and break the mafia code of silence? Well, apparently he feared the prospect of facing life in prison. His 5-page government agreement calls for him to testify in exchange for a 20-year prison term. Gotti smirked as Gravano confessed to 19 murders and gave a rare look inside the secret world of organized crime and his own initiation by Castellano into the mob. He asked me which was my trigger finger. I showed him. He pinched it and took blood out and put it on the saint. Someone lit the saint on fire. He said if I divulged any secrets of the organization, my soul should burn like this saint. Gotti's brother reacted to the testimony this way.
I think he's on drugs.
Gravano returns to the stand today with more details of murder and the mob's infiltration of labor unions and industry. In New York, I'm Mary Murphy for CBS News.
Jury here in New York City heard more graphic testimony today as federal prosecutors try again to nail the man alleged to be America's top mobster. Their star witness, his former aide, a confessed hitman who says he killed at least 19 people. Jacqueline Adams is covering the mob trial.
You've seen it in the movies, but this is real life. In a Brooklyn courtroom, Sammy the Bull Gravano is violating the blood oath he took when he joined the mob, testifying against his boss, the so-called Teflon Don or Dapper Don, John Gotti. Once Gotti's right-hand man, Gravano is the highest-ranking member of the Gambino crime family to testify for the government. Today, in Gotti's murder and racketeering trial, Gravano explained how the two men plotted the 1985 murder of then-boss Paul Castellano and his driver, Tommy Bellotti. How they watched the hit go down outside a New York City steakhouse and then drove past the bullet-riddled bodies. Gravano testified, "I believe Paul got shot first. Tommy squatted down to look through the window and somebody came up behind him and shot." After 3 failed attempts, prosecutors hope Gravano will finally help them strip the Teflon from the Don.
He's been there since John Gotti came to power. He knows where all the bodies are buried.
Indeed, on secret FBI recordings, Gotti can be heard anointing Gravano as his successor, should he go to prison or the can.
This is my wishes. That when I'm with a man, this family's gonna be one place said.
Still, the lawyer who won Gotti's earlier acquittals believes Gravano's testimony can be shaken.
They are paid government witnesses, and from time to time we have proved that they will say what the government wants them to say.
If convicted, Gotti faces life in prison. To ensure a lighter sentence, Gravano decided to sing. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, Brooklyn.
Dan Rather reporting. It took 6 years and 4 trials, but today federal prosecutors got a guilty verdict against a racketeer and murderer who became the country's best-known criminal. Giselle Fernandez reports on the rise and fall of John Gotti and what his conviction may mean on the streets.
The feds finally did it. They took down America's most notorious mafia boss since Al Capone. Charges of murder, gambling, and racketeering finally stuck to the flashy, flamboyant John Gotti.
The Teflon is gone, the Don is covered with Velcro, and every charge in the indictment stuck.
For prosecutors, it was a must-win case. The renowned Teflon Don had become a kind of folk hero for outsmarting the government 3 times in the past. Each acquittal a cause for an unabashed celebration. But the luck that once made him a legend finally ran out. This time, prosecutors came armed with lethal weapons. Gotti's right-hand man turned government witness. Sammy the Bull Gravano became the highest-ranking gangster ever to break the code of silence and testify against the Cosa Nostra. In chilling testimony, he described the murder of Big Paul Castellano, how Gotti not only ordered the hit of the former Don, but drove by to witness the bloodbath himself. Prosecutors also had secret surveillance tapes that showed Gotti as a ruthless crime boss.
This is going to be a Cosa Nostra till I die. Be it an hour from now, be it tonight, or 100 years from now when I'm in jail, it's going to be a Cosa Nostra.
He himself, on these tapes, incriminated himself and his associates and confirmed once and for all that there is indeed a Cosa Nostra, a mafia.
The jury, tightly sequestered throughout the trial, was told by the government they had reason to fear the man on the tapes. An angry defense vows to appeal the conviction that John Gotti just smirked at.
He took it like a real man, and he has vowed that the fight is not over, ladies and gentlemen.
My father is the last of the Mohegans. They don't make men like him anymore, and they never will.
On one point, the government agrees. They say John Gotti is the last of a dying breed.
The mob, as we have known it, in New York City and in the United States is on the way out.
Gotti now faces life in prison. With his conviction, prosecutors have now indicted or convicted 4 of the nation's top 5 crime bosses. And that's not the end of it. The informant who testified against Gotti is expected to be the star witness in other upcoming trials. That's what's key here. Never before has the underboss of a major crime family broken the sacred code of silence. It shows just how much the inner structure of organized crime has in fact crumbled. Dan?
Giselle Fernandez, thanks.